Hello there. Okay, so we're back after a bit of a break. Now, first things first, it would probably be good if we were to go back and read the last 2 or 3 pages of the last story we read on the last stream to finish off because the recording got cut off when the yes. I'm a little bit confused by that, but thank you. My comment is a bit okay. Okay. That's not exactly what I wanted to do. Okay, fair enough, I suppose. This, okay. So, yes, we actually had some technical difficulties with sorry, I'm just trying to do a bit of admin here. There we go. Okay, that's not that. Okay, just going to go to manage videos for a second. I want to double check that we're going to actually be starting off in the right spot. Oh, you're talking about you're talking about the thumbnail picture. Okay, I thought you were talking about me. No, that's actually Andreas Kieber, who was the last soldier of Liechtenstein. Specifically, he was he had nothing to do with writing, but I just like his old photos. I like his photos, specifically one where he has a pipe, or when he's in uniform. That photos would have been from the 1930s, specifically. For example, I'm going to go share the screen if I can. There we go. Share screen. Okay. Now I have to actually pick up which individual tab that is. There we go. Oh, yeah, this is actually this is Andreas Kieber uniform in 1935, and this is the plaque dedicated to him in Liechtenstein after his death, dedicated in 2002. As I said, he was the last soldier of Liechtenstein and fought in the Austro-Prussian War in 1866, after which the Liechtenstein army was actually dissolved. But yeah, I like his photos. They used to be sold on postcards and things as souvenirs at the time, so that's basically. Scroll up so you can actually see the name if you need to. Okay, now let me just very quickly. Okay, I need to close that, and I need to close it. Okay, I'm going to live, and I'm just going to go to the image of the last one, and sorry, the video of the last one, and I'm just going to go there to the very end, and I'm just going to double check where it stops because I remember more or less. But okay, so it goes on. Sorry. Okay. I see more or less where I've actually stopped last time. So, yeah, it's the last story, Meshkoet, I believe it's the coming of Meshkoet the Israelite, or just Meshkoet. I can look at it. Yeah, I think. Yeah, literally on the last page. So, Just for the sake of completion, I believe we should go and read the very last page of this, so that actually finish that story off. So I'm just going to start on the previous page, just so that there's a bit of a just so there's a bit more context. So this is from Josie Shannon's "Who Shall Condemn" and Other Stories, the last story, Meshkoet the Israelite. And this was the last story on the last stream, but it actually got cut off because of the Wi-Fi going out. So I'm just going to increase the size here just so I can read it more comfortably. So the professor, sorry, okay, I have to work the lips a bit. The professor looked up as the shape ceased speaking, and his face was ashy pale. The spirit was no longer there. The room was empty. He passed his hand across his forehead with a weary gesture, and thoughts long forgotten, long buried, came trooping like accusing spectres from the recesses of his memory. The clock ticked on. Hour succeeded hour. The fire burned low, but the professor never moved. His forehead rested on his hand. His attitude was one of the most abject weariness. By and by the lamp went out. Still he did not move. No one came to inquire the reason of such silence, for the professor was a curious man, and his habits were well known to his servants, so that the silence of the great old house was unbroken by a single sound. Next morning, when his valet opened the study door, he found the professor still in the same position, his head bowed upon his hand. Then when he touched him, he fell forward onto his face and lay motionless. Maybe in the far-off ages of future time, the spirit of the professor will perchance meet the still wandering spirit who visited him long since who visited him. God, I hate this word. Who visited him long since in his luxurious study, and when they meet, what will the professor answer to the warning of the spirit of Meshkoet the Israelite? That was the end of that story. And now I'm actually going to do something else that I will actually I was not specifically going to read this until I learned about it. So on a channel called I want to give proper attestation here, Orogeny Vex Read. I'm just going to put that in the I'm just going to put the link to that particular video in the chat here, just so people can actually go and watch it. Okay, that's not good. Okay. So I've put the link to the story to the video in question of when I actually found out about this story. It's a weird tale story from 1928. Well, I have to pause a bit because there we go. Let me just go and do that. So this is a weird tale story from 1928, and I became aware of its existence because this other YouTuber covered it in a video a few days ago, and I thought, well, that seems interesting enough to actually cover. So it's a weird, sort of science fiction story about life after the world was taken over by the Chinese, which apparently means that everyone is now living full-time in airplanes, I guess, and also that women have become like super masculine and dominant, and men are like universally effeminate. I don't understand, but why this logic? You'll see that this actually goes a bit harder than that and a bit weirder than that. But I will say that, for the record, that there will be some jargon relating to the Chinese. At one point, I have been made aware, and I will, if it gets very bad, I'll just politely politely go past the ethnic slurs, as it will. I hope that no one was going to be too worried about that. I'd rather not risk getting the channel hit by that. That's why, for example, I'm not going to be reading. If I ever do something like read Lovecraft's The Rats in the Walls, I'm also not going to tell you what the name of the cat is, because I value not being hit with the YouTube naughty stick. So I'm just going to the thing to cover my face, but it's kind of fell down a bit, so I might as well just close that down. I'm just doing very quickly administrative stuff to clear this down so that we can actually move forward a bit. Okay, what's this now? Oh, that's this. Sorry, I've just got my schedule update. Okay, no problem. No problem. That's unrelated. Okay, I can turn. Okay, I can then leave that, and that's what I'm going to be reading off of. Okay, I'm just going to quickly check the other. I have two copies of this link open, and it's mostly because I wanted to show off the title illustration, but there's there's nothing more beyond that. This is from the I'm going to check just very quickly. This is from 1928, from the 4th issue of Weird Tales from 1928. I really don't specifically know what it's from. Its 11th year, so I guess that's why volume 11 is in there. I'll leave a link in the description to where you can read this whole thing yourselves on the Internet Archive. It's just I don't actually know, so I'm going to be waiting a little bit, just waiting for the person who just left to come back, mostly because I can actually show off specifically the. Okay, I can go ahead and show off specific. Now I'm opening 3rd copy of this. Might as well just find the cover, because now covers are a huge part of the appeal for these old magazines. So I'm just going to see if I can, because this might have been the collected version. So I'm just going to. I actually only had the idea. To let me see now, December issue 6. So I'm just going to very quickly check, because I also wanted to show off the cover for this one. I have to go for wiki source and things like that. So let's see. Is this 1928? It should be. There we go. It's actually, yes, it is the April issue. Of course, that one is the only one that the Wikisource article doesn't have its cover for. Well, I'm just go April. Sorry, I need to see what the April. There we go. So, is this Weird Tales April 1928? Number 4. Yes, this is that one. Okay, I'm just going to copy the eBay link for this, because I did want to show off the cover. So this is the cover of the issue of Weird Tales in question. Weird Tales, the April issue from 1928, featuring the cover story for The Jewel of Seven Stones by I don't know how to pronounce this. I know it's Quinn. Quinn. I don't know how to pronounce that. And you can see Will McMahon is here. So this is the correct issue. So we have that. And now, if we're just going to wait a little bit. So yeah, if there's anyone in the chat and you're not actually showing up as watching, you can actually message me and say so because there have been issues in the past where even though people have literally been watching, their views were not being counted for some reason. Anyway, let me just find the particular thing. Yes, this is the one that we're going to stream the image. So we're going here, and the actual copy that I'm going to be reading from is separate. I wanted to post, but this is the only illustration, and it's not that big. So now I'm actually going to have to zoom into the text a lot to actually be able to read it. So I'm going to keep the second version up so you can actually see at least have some kind of visual aid for this. And as a result, because I have to zoom in a lot, on the actual document, you won't be able to see the actual thing being read. So I'm leaving this ahead. That's why it's not going to be moving along. It's going to stay on this image. And then I'm going to continue. So we're going to start reading now. And that's a hell of a name to start out with. So DOR 8437 M18, an outstanding beauty in an aerial age when all young flying women were lovely, was just now in a fierce temper. The savage frown and a hawk-like face only added to her charm. She swayed across the magnetic floor of her sun parlor, her 6 feet of willowy height like a reed in the wind. A touch of her long, steely fingers set in operation the much-used teleplane, and immediately vision of the sunny heavens overhead appeared on a side-wall screen. A slow-going, ponderous, noisy quad plane was doing its maximum of 80 miles per hour at the 2,000-foot level, apparently a Midwest farm lad going to the Atlantic Coast General Market. He was infringing on the taxi zone, but he knew that the small, brilliantly colored public service planes would not dare to hit him. At the 6,000-foot level, a passenger express whirled westward at high speed, no doubt the third section of the Boston-Pasadena triplane line. The slogan of this cross-continent corporation was, "All the flight by daylight." "Double down this old telltale," Door 8438 M18 exclaimed fervently. "I never get altitude when I want it." She angrily twirled the dial of the teleplane. The nearer planes faded out and stars began to appear in the sunlit firmament. Between 2 fixed twinkling points, a dull blue spot grew into strength on the screen. The girl glared at it and then seized a pair of calipers with which she made a radial measurement that confirmed her suspicions. "The unspeakable little beast," she muttered irately. I didn't know that was He spied on me all day yesterday, and he slept up there last night. I wish to Jehoshaphat he would float into the aerial bombing practice zone and get blown to Halifax and back. She made a further calculation that revealed by the spectrum test that the hated man was at the 26,000-foot level, far beyond the range of naked eyesight. His high-power glasses, however, made her home easily available to him, and she was convinced that the steady flashing on the indicator of her upper realm radio telephone was caused by the call that he was vainly trying to put through to her. She glanced through a window to the white enamel surface of the little landing field at the rear of the house. Her apple-green monoplane was parked just outside the one-plane hangar, its wings folded demurely. The girl clashed her glistening pointed teeth. If it had not been for that despicable male creature afloat in the ether, she could have taken to the air and made that Boston-Pasadena triplane look like a captive balloon. In San Francisco, at the Chinese tithing takeoff field, there was a young man who was not bold, but gentle, modest, and self-effacing. And of course it had to be Door 843 M18's bad luck that he was too poor to afford a twin house. "Some fine day," she murmured whimsically, "I'm going to lose my head and agree to live under the same roof with him." The girl turned back the dial of the telltale to encompass the heavily traveled air lanes up to 10,000 feet. and then she called her chum, Florence, on the lower realm radiophone. The dialing read FLO 8441M19. "Hello, Flo," she said. "This is Dorothy. I tried to get you yesterday, but you were out." "I was in all day, Dot," the other maiden declared. "I am hardening my face with tannic acid to join the African fortnight flight. That equatorial sun is triple hell on the skin." "That's queer. I must have dialed you a dozen times, Flo." "The tape doesn't show it, my dear." "Well, anyhow," Dorothy went on hurriedly, "I wanted to tell you that the dentist flew in from his laboratory and I haven't a natural tooth left in my head. He says that he never did a better job in porcelain. I have needle points on both lowers and uppers." "Congratulations, my dear," Florence said heartily. "I have 2 silly old molars left, but as I am not man-crazy, it doesn't matter. And you must remember not to bite too hard if you happen to fly to California." A flush mounted at the temples of door 843M18. The smouldering light in her dark eyes softened. "Aha! FLO 8441M19 exclaimed rallyingly. "I can tell you're trembling." Dorothy hastily took her elbow from the phone table. "That's vibration from the ozone motor," she insisted nervously. "Just a moment, my dear." She turned to look at the screen of the telltale. At the 5,000-foot level a plane was hovering, and the girl hurriedly trained her binoculars on its identification marks. Then she spoke swiftly into the phone, her tone urgent. "My awful Aunt Helen is overhead," she explained. "Slide over at once and help me to get rid of her. Let's give the old cat our maiden's creed. She can't stomach it for a minute." "Gangway," Florence shouted and hung up. Dorothy walked to the door of the sun parlour and looked out over the treeless, rolling Westchester hills. Everywhere, at spaced intervals, were small houses, each with its little white landing field that at night was electrically lighted. This was a residence section owned by unmarried young people. Farther north, the roofs just visible over the horizon were the double houses of the wedding folk, each with a two-plane hangar. Their children were housed in huge dormitories, since privacy and the bliss of solitude were not appreciated by the young of the species. Dorothy now could see quite plainly the insignia on her aunt's plane, Hell 10166W59, and up the cement state road the figure of a rescuer appeared and rapidly approached. Florence was standing on the central moving platform, and now she stepped on to the slower one to her left, thence to a still slower one, and so on to the grass plot in front of her chum's home. She entered the house just as the dreaded Aunt Helen alighted on the small flying field as softly as a feather. "Think up some old ones, Flo," Dorothy whispered. "They'll make her sick." Florence's eyes were a pitiless blue like the ice of a glacier. She draped her length perhaps an inch less than the other girls over a lounge, half-closed her eyelids, and hid her long hands in her sleeves. "Hello, old top," the aunt called out boisteringly to her niece as she entered the room and then caught sight of the visitor. "Oh, hello," she added lamely. The old lady was 59 years of age and a widow, as her flying license indicated. The average span of life for women was 100 years. They were called young up to 50, which was the marriageable deadline. Thereafter they were old and doomed to celibacy. I'm not going to make a comment about that. I'm just going to continue reading as it is. Men, delicate creatures, were aged at 45. I'm just going to quickly check things, and I'm going to wait for someone else to show up again because I am not continuing with no one around. So that's the mandatory, as it were. Okay, let's see now. They were called young up to 50, which was the marriageable deadline. Thereafter they were old and doomed to celibacy. Men, delicate creatures, were aged at 45. A widow was so rare a bird that his experience was immortalized in talking tape, whereon he explained how he miraculously escaped death at the hands of his wife before she was gathered to her mother's. Aunt Helen had been even taller than her niece, but now she was somewhat stooped. Her features were those of the eagle, rapacious and cruel. I was just saying to Dotflow remarked that virtue is its own reward. And I agree with her, Dorothy said, that to be good is to be happy. Hell 100166W59 started as if she had been stung by a hornet. A dull red overswept her lean cheeks and settled in her beak of a nose. You unmarried females give me a pain in the neck, she declared bitterly. I think your innocent pose is only a rotten trick. In my day, young women shot off their mouths with original thoughts, particularly on sex. And here you are, two flannel-mouthed hussies dealing in platitudes that were old when China conquered the world 100 years ago. A pure heart and a clean mind, Dot began. Stop, Aunt Helen groaned. A loyal love, each to its kind, Fleur finished. Love? Hell, the old lady gritted as she casually turned up the telltale. When the blue spot appeared, she turned triumphantly to the two girls. Now I know you're play-acting, she announced grimly. Up there is the man for my niece, and there isn't an atom of sentiment in his make-up. Marry him, Dot, and you'll have a twin house career and a fortune that is absolutely tide-free. There's Condor blood in his plain veins. What other male do you know who can go up to 25,000 feet and sleep there? I never could endure a man who pursues a woman, Dorothy objected, shuddering delicately, and Florence shook with her. No, Hell 10166W59 exclaimed scathingly. You want a little milksop with a schoolgirl complexion who will shriek bloody murder when you nibble his right ear. Oh, Auntie, how could you? Her niece gasped, with a sly wink at her chum. To the pure all things are pure, Florence asserted glibly. I didn't mention the left ear, the old lady pointed out in self-defense. Both girls at once screamed in well-stimulated dismay and hid their faces. Hell's bells, Hell 100166W59 moaned. You young minxes are too good to be true. I'm going to get out of here before I lose my temper. Oh, must you go? Dorothy murmured. If I stay, I'll go cuckoo, her aunt declared. But remember this, Dorothy. If you marry a one-house man, the time will come when you will wish to kill him for disturbing your meditations. And if you do that, you have to prove that he snored. You had trouble over the death of your fourth husband, didn't you? Florence asked meanly. Yes, the prosecution tried to prove that I faked the dictaphone that I put in his bedroom, Hell 100166W59 replied coolly. But I countered with testimony that he cracked his knuckles, so that was that. For the right man, her niece remarked dreamily, I believe I even could live with the poor people of Park Avenue or Riverside Drive in one of those dreadful elevator apartments and fly with him each day to his labours in the Berkshire dairies. Love is everything, Florence agreed. The old lady's retort cannot be given here, but she was still swearing to herself when she took off from the little flying airfield to go back to Adirondack home. From her 5,000-foot level, she saw above her a small biplane of a disgusting type, and idly wondered what it was doing in a speed lane. Those drop flyers had no shame. The rattle-de-bang machines took them there and back, and they thought this was flying. The flivver made a really creditable landing on the spot where Hell 100166W59's fine monoplane courser had stood, and only slightly bent a tin wing against the hangar. The flyer who alighted was a youth not quite 5 feet tall. He had an infantile face with a complexion so clear that his beauty was luminous. There was not a disfiguring muscle in his limbs. He was as smooth and rounded as a baby. Expertly he touched up his cheeks with a blush puff to remove the slight fatigue of flying, but he did not adorn his lips. They bloomed with natural health, an inveritable Cupid's bow. Over his ears he modestly wore gauze coverings, as was the custom of unmarried males. Dorothy and Florence had been absorbed in a discussion of the condor flyer that would have astonished the hard-boiled Aunt Helen. These maidens knew their rights. Man was to be chased, never the pursuer. That tie-free individual who was emulating the sentinel buzzard above them was nothing less than a horrible throwback to the sex slavery days of women in the 20th century. The gentle, faltering footsteps of the youth at the sun parlour door brought Dorothy dashing to greet him. She stooped at arm's length, fascinated with his manifold charms. Precious little man, she breathed. Oh, to think that you came to me. He stood there, eyes downcast, summoning up courage to speak. Florence, truly a chum worthwhile, quietly left the room, crossed the grass plot, and went from a slower platform to a faster until she disappeared up the road. I, the young man began, and then found his tongue. I have been ordered to fly with tithes to Peking, he went on, but I convinced myself that first I should conquer my manly reserve and bid you good-bye in person. A dreadful rumour has reached us on the Pacific coast that the Manchu women are taking white husbands by the awful law of propinquity. I shall save you, the girl asserted fiercely. Come to my arms. The youth stepped back in a panic and put a shrinking hand to his right ear. But I cannot afford a double house, he half whispered. I'm just going to check the chat for a second. Okay. I'm going to just drink something for a moment. And I'm going to wait for someone to show up. Because I am not going to read to nobody. So, yes, I'm taking a bit of a pause, waiting for someone else to show up in the audience. So we're only going to continue after someone has actually joined again. So I'm just going to sit here and wait. And I'm not going to continue until then, and I hope that's fine. If anyone watching this later, well, I'm sorry, but this is just how it is. You have to just accept this or wait until I actually skip through. So I'm sorry, but I'm going to just be reading on my phone something completely different and not out loud until such a time as someone else actually joins. Because I will not continue reading to nobody. Still nothing? So still no continuation from me. Okay. And we can continue. Now, where did I specifically stop? There we go. Dorothy glanced around at her sacred possessions with their utter privacy and independence, then bravely faced her destiny. My darling boy, she breathed, give me that right ear. Blushing furiously, he bared it from its covering, and solemnly, for the right was sacred, she bent gracefully from her waist and sunk her pointed artificial teeth into the pink shell-like offering. Ouch, he gasped. Now, no Manchu female would have the gall to claim you, the girl declared serenely. I have marked you as mine. When you return from the tithing, we shall be married, and go to live in a single house for the connubial poor. Love is everything. In their absorption in each other, they did not notice that the blue plane had been spiraling down toward them out of the ether. The condor flyer, deciding that there was not room for his landing while the field was polluted by the flivver, swooped off 100 yards and lighted in a grassy lane. Some confounded butcher boy parking against regulations, he muttered. Well, when he leaves, I'm going to kiss the flirtatious daughter right on the mouth. No other evidence is needed to prove that this man was an atavistic brute. No girl had been caressed in that disgraceful fashion for generations. The Chinese conquerors of the world had outlawed the Caucasian custom of lip contact simultaneously with the eradication of all germ diseases, and it was popularly believed that non-kissing meant the salvation of the race. I had a sporting flight from San Francisco, the beautiful youth was saying. You know, my plane has a false recognition mark, and it is powered with a second-hand pursuit plane. I had a bushel of fun with the traffic cops who towered to chase me out of a speed lane only to find that I had the wings of them. My wonderful little man, the girl exclaimed. Oh, to think of the days when I shall have your left ear too. Please, please, must you speak of that? He murmured chidingly, his azure eyes slowly welling with tears. Forgive me, Roy, Dorothy pleaded contritely. Of course I should be satisfied with the engagement here. The married one will come in due time. I shall try to contain myself and not offend you again. You are pardoned, the young man said. The thought of matrimony is terrifying to me. But I know you'll be gentle and considerate, and now I must go. I wish to reach the Denver tourist hangars before dark. Goodbye, dearest. And I'm just going to wait a little. So again, we've fallen down to 0, which means I'm going to not read until that has changed. So we are currently on page, let me check. So yes, that would be that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're about 2/3 through, oddly enough. And okay, now we can continue. As I said, we're about 2/3 through with this one. It's a bit short. When you would definitely think there would be a lot more to the setup, but I'll go on and explain this as we go along. So, oh, let me bite you just once more. Must you? He submitted to the caress, then fled to his disguised flivver and went hurtling to the west. The condor flyer slowly approached the girl's home. He was a very tall man, at least 5'6", and he walked with what was lamentably close to a vulgar assurance. His face was strong. There was in the Museum of Antiquities the portrait of a 10-year-old boy of the lusty 20th century whose features resembled this man's. Personally, I am a little confused why the author feels the need to emphasize that the men in his future society look like children. I definitely think that's a bit sus, but let's still continue anyway. Yielding to the racial distaste of superfluous hair, he had faithfully employed acids and electricity to remove all such growth from his arms and legs and chest. After marriage, he vowed mentally he wouldn't give a hoot. He would let himself go and permit nature to take its course. Hello, Dot, he cried out as he entered the room. Give us a kiss right on the smacker. I'll give you a smack right on the kisser, she reported furiously. Her doubled up fists were eloquent of her meaning, although she naturally hesitated to strike a man. Oh, well, I can wait until after this ceremony, the fellow rejoined calmly, but none of this ear-nibbling for me. That's the trick of cats and dogs and A word for the Chinese I shall not repeat. It's already come up once, that's why I had to sort of skimp over it. And anyway, we're waiting for a little bit. I'm just going to go and drink something. Okay, well, maybe a little while still. So, I'm 100% American. The slant eye, the eyes never conquered us Condor guys. If they hadn't made us tie-free, would have bombarded Peking from the 25,000-foot level and put their eagle blood machines on the blink. If you only knew how repellent you are when you boast, the girl remarked hotly. I'm not boasting, I'm admitting, the ruffian replied. And I've got a 2-house joint that's waiting for you. I was to meet your Aunt Helen here to talk it all over, but I saw that she ducked out for some reason. Did you give the old gal the bum's rush? What coarse womanish language you use, Dorothy exclaimed disgustedly. Have you no manly refinement at all? I've got something better, the brute asserted, drawing a document from his pocket. Cast your lamps on this and sign on the dotted line. Door 8437 M18 gasped at sight of the paper, and her hawk-like features blanched. It was the well-known forcible marriage decree of the Chinese viceroy in America, permitting the holder to have and to hold any unmarried female whom he desired as his legal wife. Here was an ancient idea completely out of tune with the times. I claim the olden privilege of the harvest moon, the girl announced definitively. That give me 6 weeks of absolute freedom, you cad. Well, who tipped you off, the man muttered angrily. She did not explain that Florence had been her adviser. The Chinese law was strict in that a suitor must not only wait for the harvest moon, but entirely absent himself from the scene in the interim. I'll fly to an oasis in the Sahara Desert and grow as fat and round as any girl could demand, this fiend in human form asserted. With a grin, and he added to himself, I'll grow hair to my heart's content too. I hope my chest will look like a mattress. Anyone else feeling a little uncomfortable? Because I admit I'm feeling the trifle uncomfortable by this. This entire thing is very clear fetishistic undertones, but I feel we've sort of stepped into the territory with the masks. Kind of slipped off a bit, to be honest. Well, I'm going to just wait a little. So, oh, right. There we go, there it is. Okay, I found my spot again. Meanwhile, 2 groups of school children had approached the Condor airplane. In one party were girls, slender, tall creatures with sharp faces that promised to become adorably hawk-like. The boys were cherubic and bashfully kept to themselves. Let's play school, the largest girl suggested, or shall we chase the gizzards out of those confounded little sissies? I simply can't endure their curls. It's a hot day, another lassie pointed out, and of late I haven't had the urge to tease the plump darlings. The first girl gave her colleague a hard look, but the latter was greedily eyeing one of these smaller lads. Mention that whole uncomfortable thing. It's still going on. Why is McMahon this obsessed about talking about children? It's a little unsettling. So, yeah, it's a bit odd. A bit odd in it. By the way, we're almost done with the story. I think there's only about... Let me just check. Let me check and see. Yes, there's less than 3 pages left. So yeah, you would think, okay, we've barely gotten to the point where the conflict or the tension or whatever only just begun to sort of be set up, and we're already going to have like it's going to end in less than 3 pages, and we have this entire side plot with a bunch of random school children. But that's how it is. And it's It's not going to be good, let me tell you. So let's continue, shall we? He caught her gaze and blushingly turned his pretty head. All right, school it is, the tallest maiden decided. Now, children, the lesson will be on the art of flying. Oh, that bores me to tears, the youngest girl of all protested. We know it all by heart. Do you, you little slob? The volunteer teacher remarked. Let's hear you give the first lesson. In the glorious days of the machine gun age, the little girl intoned, Li Fung Fat, a charlatan of Hopang Ho, conceived the idea of transfusing the blood of a hawk into the veins of a chicken in order to make the latter fowl a sign of the skies. I don't really know how that's supposed to work, because, well, humans die when they get the wrong blood type from other humans. And getting blood from another person doesn't miraculously change bone structure, but what do I know? The charlatan was beheaded when his game rooster, so treated, pursued the emperor's hunting falcon into the clouds and struck it dead with his spurs. Notice that we're still talking about the emperor? But, we thought this was supposed to be like a female-ruled, female-dominated society, but the Chinese overlords of the entire world are apparently ruled by an emperor still. Note, none of this is going, as far as I understand, none of this is going to be explained or gotten into detail at all, because, saying slurs about the Chinese and them wanting their taxes sure as hell is a lot more pertinent to the story than explaining the basic foundations of how this world even bloody works. On to more exposition, which is clumsily forced in here through this playing school bit. She paused for breath. That'll do out of you, the tallest girl announced. Next pupil. Another child took up the time-worn tale. I'm sorry, I've seen a name spelled here that is the... I don't know. It sounds... I'm just going... In fact, I'm going to look this up if this is a real name, and this is going to go... No, I'm just going to... Sorry, I'm just looking. Is that a real name? Oh my Gideon! I just realized what this is. So, oh my... So, it's... The person they're talking about here is... I'm just going to read the line, and I'm going to explain. If you don't catch it, I'm going to tell you what's so funny about it is. So it says, Irnech Droff, the 10th of his industrial line, having partly lived down the stigma of a fortune won in the manufacture of a sickening type of automobile which crawled over the Earth's surface at less than 40 miles per hour, dedicated his life to the study of bird blood. He discovered in this magic fluid the secret of gravitation, and was enabled to apply it to airplanes so that an accidental fall became impossible. The inventor thereup marketed a cheap flying machine that today disgraces the air as his ancestors' automobiles polluted the earth. By the way, Irnech Droff, that's Henry Ford backwards. Sorry. Anyway, you flunked the name of the secret, the pretend teacher said severely. I know, several girls shouted in unison. Well, Flossie, you give it, was the command. Oh boy, this is a sentence. I'm going to try and say this, but sorry, I just need to send something. Specifically, I need to send the invite for this to someone. Sorry. Well, I had it copied somewhere, and then I need to actually go and get it from somewhere when I posted it. Just here. just in case. Oh no. Sorry. Sorry, I'm just hot news about my friend having slight issues, having some medical issues, so I'm worried about them. Okay, that's slightly made me worried a bit, but things appear to be working towards being okay. Like there's nothing tragic happened. So I can continue reading this now. So sorry, but yeah, this what I stopped is because it's like a very, 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 very complicated word. It says the compound is called trypanosomaniacal hermionitis. The answer promptly came, and Irnef Droff, the tenth, made his out of blackbird's blood because they were cheap. My mother's plane is a sharp-skinned hawk, one of the little girls exclaimed proudly, but my father says it must have all owl blood in it. She stays out a lot at night. So, I'm not sure if that's a... I'm not sure if that's an attempt at... hinting at potential marital infidelity or just a random aside, but whatever. You can't tell with Will McMahon because he seems to be horny as fuck when writing this, I'm sorry to say. All the girls laughed loudly at this, and little boys nearby looked self-conscious in their presence. Sorry. All the little girls laughed loudly at this, and the little boys nearby looked self-conscious in their pretense of not understanding. At that moment, a welcome diversion occurred. Oh, so that is a reference to potential marital infidelity. Jesus. Yeah, don't give McMahon any benefits. This man, benefit of the doubt, this man is constantly horny, it seems. And it's like, man. So let's continue then. A missile out of the sky struck the center of a pond alongside the lake. The boys shrieked in terror, but the girls dashed to see the treasure trove. It was a chicken, still much alive, but entirely denuded of feathers. The largest girl rescued the fowl from the water and held it head down with the cruelty of her sex. "Oh, let the poor thing go," a small boy cried out in anguish, as he buried his pretty face in his hands to shut out the pitiable sight. "Isn't that just like a boy?" the girl demanded of her companions. "Now, how did he get here in his boudoir condition?" At the sound of that frank word, boudoir, all the boys promptly left with their heads in the air. Of course, they knew the girls would be girls, but this was going too far. I'm betting the birds escaped from a coop on a kosher chicken truck flying down to Harlem Valley, a girl suggested. I don't know if that's supposed to be... I don't know, is it? I don't know, it just feels... That sentence feels a bit weird, I'm feeling like there's some sort of racialist tendencies there, but I can't really pick them out, so I'm just going to continue. It jumped out into 100-mile air pressure and lost its feathers and then was blown a mile over here. Sounds reasonable, their leader agreed, unless this is Li Fung Fat's famous game rooster and he tackled a condor. The girls chuckled heartily at this bizarre thought while they poked their long, wiry fingers into the chicken's plump body. It squawked feebly and struggled to escape from the torture. By the way, we're about a page away from... It's less than 2 pages to the end. And, we've completely sidetracked the entire plot to have a bunch of children talking about a chicken and retroactively besmirched the name of Henry Ford. Well, you've never been? Girl-like, the little savages looked about for something to focus the cruelty that swayed them. They yearned to sacrifice this windfall from the heavens in a fitting manner. Condor, one tall child remarked thoughtfully. There stands a machine of that blood. Let's put a transfusion of this rooster into its veins. Yes, let's, another reckless miss cried excitedly. They swarmed into the cockpit and opened the equilibration chamber, and then the tallest girl tore open the fowl's neck with her steely hands and guided the crimson flow into the receptacle. The flying man would not have objected had he known. It was an interesting experiment, and he had an affinity with roosters and bulls and rams. The insignia on his plane was Buck 27. Is that innuendo? It's probably innuendo. It meant that he was Buck, an unmarried man, aged 27, a rogue if there ever was one. Yeah, sure, that's what it means. Well, if it's a hen, what if it's a hen? A girl inquired, eagerly watching the flow of blood. If it is, this play not to lay eggs, the chief experimenter replied. But who gives a hoot? She tossed the still struggling fowl to the ground, and with shrieks of laughter, the rowdy crowd kicked it along the lane in an impromptu football game. The condor flyer stepped out onto the sun porch and stared at the noisy girls. Little savages, he exclaimed. Thank God I was born a man. I'm only sorry you weren't endowed with fewer womanly traits, Dorothy retorted. Come in here and sign over to me the usual forfeit of 51% of your property in the event that a fat woman of the Oasis proves alluring to your He-Man tastes. 51%. I don't really know what to say to that. I'm just going to continue. She said the word fat as if it meant unclean. All right, my predacious beauty. Oh, that's actually a fitting description, considering the fact that we've been told multiple times that her chosen fiancé literally looks like a child. But, you know. But I'll be back on time to tame you, kid, or bust a lung trying. As he mounted his blue machine to tower into the azure sky, he observed blood splashes in the cockpit. Some ruffian of a girl got a good sock on the snout, he told himself amusedly. Now he's happy at seeing children get physically hurt. Is there anyone in this story that isn't terrible in every conceivable way? Besides, I guess, the Roy in his subjugated way. Then he took off to the south, intending to make a vast high circle out of the Atlantic Ocean and to sleep 5 miles above the home of his betrothed before setting out for the Sahara Desert. With no riding lights showing, Dorothy could not see him, and thus the letter of the Chinese archaic law would be obeyed. It was midnight when door 8437M18 suddenly awakened, a roaring in her ears and a flashing light on her eyelids. The crash that followed on the cement road nearby advertised an aerial disaster such as had not occurred for a generation. An airplane actually had fallen out of the sky. Lights sprang up on many flying fields in the neighborhood, and soon a dozen airplanes were clustered about the smoking ruins of the crashed machine. Dorothy and Florence identified the charred form of the aviator. They were apologetic when they did so, because the one means of identification was a gold tooth, and this marked the dead man as a Bulgarian. I don't know. I don't know. You're sitting pretty now, Dot, Flo remarked. You've got the guy's tie-free bankroll, and you can marry the beautiful boy you love and stake him to a twin house. Can and will, the fortunate girl announced. Someone just died.
horribly, screaming, probably burning. But, we get his money, so it's... Everyone in this story is awful. I'll make a night flight and catch him at Denver. I can easily bribe the Chinese tithers to put a substitute in his place. Oh my. The sentence that I've just come across. Oh my God. That's a... Oh. Oh, good. Oh my. I'm going to show this. I'm not going to say it. Good Lord, am I not going to say it, but I'm going to do this to you. And I'm going to specifically, zoom in on this particular sentence that I've just come across. And I'm just going to sit there for a second. I'm just going to... I am not reading that, let me tell you. Don't be historical, my dear. Oh, but just think, Flo, tomorrow night I'll have Roy by the left ear. Some girls have all the luck, Flo 8441819 remarked enviously, and I hope you settle down now, girlie. Who wouldn't, Dorothy demanded happily, with a sweet little man like mine? The little schoolgirls held a secret conference over their responsibility in the matter of the featherless fowl. Some of them argued that it was a game rooster whose blood overcame the gravitation of the condor fluid. Others asserted that it was a hen that weakened the floating element. Why? Surely based on the entire societal the entire society and its attitude towards gender and femininity and what that even means, surely that would mean definitionally that it being a hen would be seen as a good thing, as a sign of strength and virility, instead of being seen as, oh, it's a hen, so it made the whole apparatus weaker by its inclusion. You're literally going against your entire setting's ethos. Just for... I don't understand you. Anyway, at any rate, the mixture had proved effective and the condor fly was dead, and Dorothy bid her shy young man on the left ear, and they're living happily ever after. Now that one, I'm just going to go and this, and I'm going to close this one and that one, and yeah. So yeah. So what have we learned from that story? So this was published in 1928. So roughly speaking, if it was sort of set into like 2038 or thereabout, so we have the story where the Chinese just somehow take over the world. Apparently, we don't know if they just take over America, but it's implied they've taken over the entire world, I guess, maybe. I don't know. But then, for some reason, I don't understand what that has got to do with the whole idea of, gender roles have flipped and now women are both physically taller, physically stronger, and are the dominant, commanding, pursuing sex. Except the descendants of the Americans who live in plains and also live in plains, and I don't know, for some reason they didn't, but then everyone else in society, I guess, did. Part of the Americans, but some other people in America, most of the population of America underwent this masculinization of the female gender, I guess, and then the feminization, infantilization, and empowerment of men. And I don't, again, why would the Chinese do any of that? Why would they support any of that? I mean, the Chinese, not exactly, both historically before the fall of the Empire of China, and after, during the warlord period, and even after, when when Mao seized power, not exactly known to be like super massively feminist. So I don't see where those two concepts meet at all. And the writer, I guess, just didn't really bother to think that through, and just sort of said, well, the Chinese have taken over, so now women are masculine and men are effeminate little boys who look like children. Which I kind of, also, I don't understand why the guy who was said to be this like survivor of this rugged manly component of male society, why he was specifically stated to physically resemble a 10-year-old child as far as his face is concerned. What was that about? Why was that a thing at all? And then, of course, there's just the general weirdness of it. It's like, oh, we forced in this bit, which is like, okay, we have to get a dig in at Henry Ford, I guess, and like the like chicken, like conda blood makes planes unable to crash, whatever, and then I don't know. I mean, yeah, and let's not beat around the bush. I mean, either yeah, the writer obviously wanted to be domed by a tall ass woman and wanted to get his face gnawed on. And as the YouTube video that I've currently watched about this, and again, whose name I actually forgot. Oh, I forgot because it was a bit. So as the channel, I'm trying. I don't know. As the channel Orogeny Vex Read said, which I've specifically quoted in the which I specifically quoted in the replies here, said, yeah, the biting ear thing, that's apparently not something that exists in Chinese custom at all, so no idea where he got that one from. So yeah, apparently, I was just going to say, probably, someone was getting after that. But that's, that one, as it was. Now, I'm going to. I was thinking that for another story, I'm not sure how long this stream will be, but we can do another story at least from The Mistaken Fury. I've actually read a few of these, and I have to go through the contents page to check which one of these we already did, so I will not actually go through them again. So I'm just going to try and find where the contents in here are. There we go. I believe we did the log of office. I think, okay, the love keeper and the water nymph. That looks like we didn't do that. Oh, maybe we didn't do the love office. Let me just check, because let me consider. How long is it? That's 4. Okay. 30 pages, which is I'm not sure there's a bookmark in here, so I'm just going to very quickly go through that. Okay, and we can probably go and read something in here. Although I'm trying to pick something that's not that lengthy. Let's see, what is this one? Letters from the Phaeacian capital. How many pages is that one? That one's also pretty. That one's 23 pages. Suppose we can go with that. Alternatively, I could just also end the stream a bit early after an hour, because I know it's not exactly a great time of it. But I did the main thing I wanted to do, nearly finish off the story we actually got interrupted on first time, and then read this story because it was weird and I got reminded of it. But yeah, so I'm digesting a really old book smell. old book smell specifically. I am now wondering. Well, I'm just going to check my messages on there. It has been. I've had a bit of trouble trying to find specific things to read. Okay, yeah, I could definitely take that off because I've already read it, so that was done. What is this one? That's Driftwood. That's the vampire. Definitely need to go for that one again. So, yeah, I'm gonna wait a couple of minutes to see if there's any more interest. But but then afterwards, I might actually just go because we accomplished what we came here for specifically, and in the main anyway. I would have to. I would have to think about. Okay, so yeah, so let's actually go and read letters from the Phaeacian capital from, as I said, the mistaken fury and other lapses. But I only promised this, so if someone was just to come up, also I don't actually need to. I don't actually need to continue doing this, and there we go. And now let's actually start. The following letters, written on materials of the flimsiest appearance when we consider the antiquity of the subject matter, and enclosed in a casket consisting of a human skull, are the last reward of the divining operations long since undertaken in the Gulf of Dreams, in the region supposed to have once been occupied by the mysterious continent of Atlantis. I'm just I'm just checking because I have the sneaking suspicion we might have read this already. Well, either way, it wouldn't have made a difference because on the off chance that we've already read this, then I'm sorry for the repetition, but it doesn't appear to be. Anyway, there we go. Sorry. Again. So, actually, I might as well just go and find the cover image. For this edition. There we go. Sorry, I'm just trying to find an actual decent image of the cover. And I'm not having that good of a job at it. Oh, at it. Oh, this I can definitely check. This. What is this? Sorry. No, that's not what I wanted to put at all. What are you doing? Sorry, I'm trying to copy this by one hand, and because I'm holding the book in the other. So we're going to go to images, and then we're going to try and find. Are you kidding me? Is there no decent images of this? What? Hold on. I have it in me hands, and sorry. There, for some reason, it wasn't showing. It wasn't showing the cover at all. I don't know why. There we go. Okay. Now then, if or it's possible we might actually just postpone this and read this tomorrow. Oh well, someone's actually shown up. Then might as well just actually go on with me decision then. So this is the cover, and as I said, these are letters from the Phaeacian capital. The following letters, written on material of the flimsiest appearance when we consider the antiquity of their subject matter, and enclosed in a casket consisting of a human skull,
the last reward of the diving operations long since undertaken in the Gulf of Dreams, in a region supposed to have once been occupied by the mysterious continent of Atlantis. They would seem to have been written, as a perusal will show, by a young Phaeacian dilettante in the course of a correspondence with a friend engaged in administrative work on the distant frontier of the Phaeacian kingdom, and contain an account of the visit of Ulysses. Sorry, turn the page. Sorry, yes, it will. Of Ulysses to Phaeacia, already described so vividly in Homer's Odyssey. There are several discrepancies, as was to be expected from the narrative of Homer, but on the whole that narrative is borne out in a remarkable manner, and the letters form a curious commentary upon, and in some points an elucidation of, the poetic version. Homer's picture of the grace, the luxury, and the decadence of this mysterious maritime people at the world's end is strangely confirmed and developed. We see again what to the simple Ithacans seemed enchantment pure and simple, the working of their science. We get a new glimpse of the Princess Nausicaa, that freshest and loveliest of the maidens of ancient literature, and of her innocent preference for the hero, which is so exquisitely touched by the Homeric bard. Finally, a curious light is thrown upon the sudden and somewhat surreptitious departure of Ulysses from that kingdom by the sea. The translation is naturally free and in some particulars uncertain, in regard, for instance, to the details of what seems the astonishing modernity of the Phaeacian civilization. In many cases the translator has supplied the name of the nearest modern equivalent which conjecture could supply, the meaning of the Phaeacian word being only deducible from the context. It must be remembered that, with the exception of Homer, this is the only document in existence which throws any light upon the degree of progress attained on the Atlantean continent, of which Phaeacia seems to have formed part. It was doubtless true of the Atlanteans generally, what Homer says of the Phaeacians, that they mingled with none, in other words, had little or no dealings with that small and distant Asian civilization which was the whole world for Homer. Ulysses is the only European we know to have touched there, and it is a matter of history that the whole continent was was destroyed in some ocean cataclysm many centuries before the opening of the Christian era. Letter 1. Hariantus sends Cimothos his best wishes. You seem to have taken very kindly to exile and simple life. Your letters are positively bellying with hill weather and the barbaric joy of living, by which I mean eating and hunting and hanging poor thieving Highlanders. Your very handwriting breathes of the furs and murmurs of torrents and tempests. I daren't leave it about in my room because it makes such a draught. I declare your last letter but one irremediably warped one of my best watercolours. You remember the little dancer by Polybos. Poor dear, she is not dressed for the fresh air treatment. You say that you are pining for a theatre or a dance or even a ride in a motor cab. Be content. You cannot imagine how bored I am in the very garden of all these delicacies. Dancing delights me not. No, not in the proximity of motor cabs. Even lyre playing is an intolerable effort. And as for writing, your friend the amateur court nightingale has been silent for 3 full moons. I am afraid there is no hope for me but the simple life, or the new hygiene, or the new Philistinism. Note: Philistine or Philistinism. The name in the original is that of an insular people to the northeast of Atlantis, and identified by some scholars with inhabitants of our own islands. When you come home on leave, you will find me in the parks with Euryalus and company, cultivating the body, and specializing in strongman events. Alas, for the decadence of the decadents! Well, I should improve my chances in one quarter. Ah, Nausicaa, princess of the golden snood, goddess of Phaeacian, so sweet, so tyrannous, so simple, so incomprehensible, so young, so immemorial, so infantily frolicsome, so hopelessly serious. Beshrew me if I live for aught else but to see her won and lost. Thou hast my best wishes there, thou knowest, O Timothos, after myself. And what are poets born for if not to love in vain? I gave her the mountain leopard cub you sent for her. She received it graciously, and it looks very pretty in the ilex garden where it is to be kept, for the amusement of the public on open days. I hope it will get big quickly and eat those red antelopes with the very loud markings, or even the dreadful sentimental white doe which Euryalus presented. The Guild of S the Guild of S. Nausicaa ought to be excused taxes as public benefactors. I'm sorry. It actually says the Guild of S. Nausicaa ought to be excused taxes as public benefactors. Here are you and Euryalus before you, beautifying the city gardens. Then we can claim the launch which Polybus designed for her, quite the fairest item of the royal flotilla at the river carnival, except its freight. My own poor ode upon her coming out ought, I am sure, to count. Testy old Demodocus himself confessed that it was an enrichment of the national literature. Surely he said something very like that. Yes, she inspired a very golden age of art. And none of us have a ghost of a chance. We are all decadents. Her lover must be a man. She told me so herself on the East Terrace. And I had been fetching and carrying for her all day. And you are jealous of my tete-a-tetes. Think of the pity of it. The scene was so romantic. The moon rose golden over the sea, and the air was full of the odor of hyacinths, and they were playing the purple waves waltz in the ballroom. And then to have a remark like that thrown at one, and yet, Timothos, if you had seen her eyes as she said it, but this is hardly fair on you. It is a pity poor old Demodocus is blind for his sake. She has taken look in her eyes when she is listening to his barbarous old ballads, with their brain-scattering heroes. Confound them! That was the only use they had for brains in those days, apparently, to bespatter convincingly the axe blades of heroes, and the gentle Nausicaa kindly at the thought of the hearty old times. Kindles at the thought of the hearty old times. What do you think she did yesterday? She had conceived an idea that every woman ought to know the details of household work at first hand. So she collects all the dirty linen of the royal household for the week, packs it into a mule cart, and she and her maids and half a dozen girls or so out of her set, out of our set, drive it all down to Halcyon Cove and pitch it into the water. Hi-oh for the simple life. I shall have to take up washing myself, or take in is the technical phrase, is it not? It will be easier than modelling my odes on the styles of Demodocus. We had a sensation last night at the palace. There was a big dinner going in honour of some distinguished astronomer or marmalade maker, I forget which, and suddenly there walked into the room a great picturesque-looking fellow in tight but impeccable flannels and sat down on the fender, which seems to be a custom with some of the Eastern Islanders when imploring protection. He spoke a most outlandish dialect, but we managed to understand him after a time. He told a long story about being shipwrecked and wanting to be sent home, heaven knows where. He had the manners of a duke, and the dear old queen took him under her wing at once. There seems every prospect of his being lionized. He is a noble animal. Talks well, too, when one can understand his jargon. I was fairly near the bigwigs, having secured a place whence I could adore my princess. Demodocus gave us one of his most smashing barbarisms, all about the Trojan War, and made the islander weep. But whether from pity at the carnage or grief at the badness of the poetry, I cannot say. These savages are so emotional. What I want to know is how he paid for his flannels, for he must have bought them in the town. He was rather drunk before the end of the evening. The sports of the Philistines Club, under royal patronage, are to be held today. I must break off, for I promised to attend my princess thither. Cheer up, old fellow. I wish to heaven it were otherwise, but she treats me like a spaniel, without the kisses, yet rather than the outer dark. Farewell.
Letter 2. Hey, Dad. Sorry, I only noticed you just now.
So, letter 2. Haliantus to Kimoto sends love. I hope you will not suffer from shock at getting another letter from me so soon. I cannot resist telling you the latest about the Queen's Islander. We all trooped down to the parks as arranged, our friend open-eyed at the buildings and the traffic, the electric trams, the motors, and the motor launches in the harbour. I tried to explain to him something in the mechanism of our glorious civilization, but he remained very puzzled. He regards Phoenicia as a sort of fairyland, I believe. The king has promised to send him home on one of the larger motor yachts, an idea which made him grin like a happy child. He was rigged magnificently in petticoats and mantles such as your Highland chiefs wear, a suit which Nausicaa found for him in a theatrical wardrobe. He refused to accommodate himself to a mourning suit. The splendor of his appearance was only surpassed by the perfection of his manner. Savage nations cultivate manner, they say. At any rate, there was not a courtier or noble but seemed a very cockney beside him yesterday. I saw a good deal of him. Pages are not that well cut. I saw a good deal of him, rather too much, in fact, for he seems to have taken quite a fancy to Nausicaa. But more of that anon. When we got down to the enclosure, there were the Crown Prince and his lot, Anchialos, Elatreus, our old friend Euryalus, and the rest, who for the space of more than 2 hours leapt, raced, hurdled, pitch-poled, and generally displayed their various proficiencies in manly sport for our benefit. Heaven knows who won what, although I had to take down every blessed event, time, height, length, breadth, depth, and thickness, for my gentle mistress. I thought the stranger did not look very much impressed, but the fun came afterwards. After the prize-giving, Prince Laodamas asked our friend to try a put at the weight. He laughed and said he was getting too old, whereupon swaggering Euryalus must needs remark that they did not do this kind of thing in trade, did they, or something of the kind. Holy sea gods! The foreign fellow stuck out his chin and growled a few cutting aphorisms at the expense of Euryalus. Then he picked up the weight and hurled it. I'm willing to swear it went 3/4 as far again as the longest punt there. And not content with this, the island wonder next flings me off his mantle and challenges the whole field to leap, run, wrestle, box, lift, or hurl. Euryalus and the Philistines' club stood there like fools, without lifting a finger, and I do not blame them, for the fellow showed a frame like the Heracles in the market as he stood in his tunic. It was a scene indeed, believe me. I saw tears of admiration in her eyes, Kimotos. In the evening we feted him again. First there was a dance, of which I was glad, for he does not dance, and we were all getting a little jealous of the kind eyes Nausicaa turned on him. She talked him She talked him unnecessarily long as it was. Supper came next, and Demodocus opened fire as usual, this time with that really rather fine song of his about Ares and Aphrodite, which the censor made such a fuss about the year he was abolished. After supper came the stranger's turn. We heard who he was and all his story, which kept us till the small hours. And who do you think he is? One of the principal characters in old Demodocus's Troy ballads, Ulysses the Ithacan, not yet returned to his native land from the classical battlegrounds. You remember much enduring godlike Ulysses? He seems to have been blown about the world from time immemorial, vainly toiling to get back to his good wife and his savage bands. No wonder he weeps when Demodocus sings of his cronies in the Trojan War. His storytelling was magnificent, better than any romance, with its beauty and wonder and peril, its famous realms and fearful monsters and fairy goddesses. It was a thing to stir one's blood, Kimotos, aye, to rouse one's tears. Then, for an anticlimax, up struts old Professor Isknaus of the Royal Geographical Society, and books the hero on the spot to give a big lecture on his travels at the Institute next week. I see it in most of the papers this morning. There is the most delightful confusion in the ranks of the higher criticism, that is, the ism which holds that the gods are merely natural powers personified, you know. Here is confutation from one who is on terms of nodding acquaintance with their divinity ships. I am rather curious to see what the learned monthlies will have to say on the subject. The best authorities nowadays agree that the siege of Troy is a solar myth. And the note here, Dummkopf argues from this passage that the period allotted by the Homeric chronologist for the wanderings of Ulysses is not sufficiently long. The historical criticisms of the Trojan War, he says, would scarcely have advanced so far within 10 years of the event itself. In support of his contention, we may note that even our modern theorists, the acuteness of whose skepticism was surely not surpassed in Phaeacia, have not yet rejected the evidence, for instance, for the Franco-Prussian War. End of the note, and continue onward then. Or if I can actually turn the page. Yes, we are all Ulysses mad in the capital at present. I only hope Nausicaa will not proceed to fall seriously in love with him. Think of the danger, Kimotos. One of her old ideal brain splatterers come to life and walking about, and the handsomest figure of a gigantic pirate chief you could imagine to boot. He is married already, if that is any comfort. I wonder if his wife is as well preserved as he. You shall know more when there is more to tell. What a jape if the whole thing turned out a hoax. Letter 3. Halianthus sends Kimothos his blessing. Our Islander episode has had the strangest denouement, and one which will interest you. Don't be alarmed, she has not eloped with him, but there have been searchings of heart and more than that among the guild of St. Nausicaa. The yacht on which she was to be sent home, it belongs to Euryalus, was fitted up on the morning after the Philistine sports. He had quite an oriental treasury in one of the holds, consisting of the present society has showered on him. He was in great demand at all the smart houses, and at present seemed an easy way of getting an introduction. It was no wonder the fellow didn't hurry his departure. They gave him such a rousing good time, especially the women. Boating parties with the court people all day, dinners with some big club or society every other night, tennis, theatres, afternoon teas, bazaars. You should have seen him in his big plate and afternoon tea. He seemed to see that hidden raison d'etre for the function which society did when, emerging out of barbarism, it first founded afternoon teas, and which it had been vainly trying to remember ever since. Or the thing may have been only another triumph of his manner. We were possibly seeing the much enduring godlike or angelic side of him at its best. He was certainly great at afternoon teas. His Geographical Society lecture was a big success. So incidentally was his little address on goddesses I have known, given at a girls' friendly society to which Nausicaa took him. Finally, the enterprising manager of the Hippodrome was agitating to bring him before the footlights, I hear. I think he would have got him ultimately, if his price had been good enough, for the fellow, for all his magnificent air, had a keen eye to the main chance. But now for the excitement. It was not long before our gentle group of rivals discovered what I told you about his, success with Nausicaa. Indeed, it was rather obvious. We felt quite unemployed. The only look-in we had was at the dances, and even then, when she wasn't sitting out, she seemed to waltz with one eye on the bully islander. It was really getting somewhat sickening. Young Erythneus declared he had been seen coming out of a dancing academy in a street off the front, and was learning to waltz on the quiet. The Philistines have hated him like fun, you must know, ever since the incidents of the sports. This cutting them out with Nausicaa was an adding injury to insult. The climax came when Euryalus, who must be allowed a certain gift for intrigue, extracted from one of the maids, you remember little Galenis, with the slant eyes, a certain little story. Nausicaa herself, it seems, was the fairy princess who brought our barbarian into his wonderland. She it was who discovered him a shipwrecked vagrant, welcomed him, clothed him, and fed him, and did the honours generally, gave him a lift, in fact, in her mule cart, and put him up to the dramatic entry in the dining hall. It was on the occasion of the washing expedition, about which I believe I told you, Gallienus's narrative was inimitable. They had finished their washing, it appears, had spread the draperies to dry on the rocks, and were having a little al fresco tennis when a ball flew into a bed of oysters by the meadow side. I dare say they made a good deal of noise, for presently there emerges from behind the osiers a fearsome figure like a wood god, dishevelled, raised from sleep, and so scantily attired that he carried a great bow of hawthorn before him for modesty's sake, like Adam in the old mythology books. The girls fled shrieking. Only Nausicaa held her ground for a parley. Can't you see her, the fearless young goddess, with the sea wind in her hair? He took her for one, anyhow, made a piteous tale of sea sorrow, and implored guidance and protection. The end of it was that he was sent down to the river to wash the brine off him, given a suit of damp flannels, one mystery explained. They were the crown prince's, and much too small at that, but afresh with cold chicken pie and the other remains of the picnic, and set down from the mule cart within a mile of the north gate, well primed as to his next move regarding access to the palace.
I don't quite know why now, but his tale seemed to the guild to clinch matters. The unanimous fiat went forth, the thing must cease.
The question was how. I think we settled it rather neatly. I told you the yacht which was to take him home had been fitted out several days ago. We invited him to a big dinner on board, given by members of the Royal Yacht Squadron, most of them incidentally members of the Guild, and got him gloriously drunk. There were several old sea dogs there who knew something of deep sea secrets, and in their company, and with the wine in him, his discourse was epic. Even we who had heard him tell his story before King Alkinos were surprised at the infinity of its treasures. The romance, the eloquence, the exhaustless experience, aye, the deep piety, my boy, and the quiet, imperturbable humour. The man was indeed a hero. Get a man drunk, they say, and you shall see if he be a cad or a gentleman. Well, this man was of earth's noblest, for all he was a barbarian and a spatterer of brains. You laugh, Timothos, to see the chief of the decadents a prey to enthusiasm. I tell you, I believe every word, with allowances which the fellow told us. And I begin to opine that there is something of right in Nausicaa's instinct, when she harks back to the days of the old heroics. And we learnt then what one would not have guessed from the air of childish delight with which he sauntered among the gewgaws of our fawning metropolis. What, had we known it earlier, might possibly have turned us from the purpose for which we inveigled him aboard last night. I mean the deep longing he had to be back on that little bleak rock at the world's end which he called his home. Late in the evening he told us of it all, of his old father, of his boy, and especially of his wife, poor wife of an arrant sailor, for all she is a queen. He revived something of his friendly enthusiasm for us when the king's health was given, and joined hilariously in the general chorus of Phaeacia rules the waves. But his last injunction to us as we carried him to bed was to take him home to Ithaca. Well, they took him. The rest of us left the yacht soon after, and Euryalus, Eretmeus, and the yacht's crew took her past the harbour lighthouse as daylight dawned, and turned her prow to eastward. This morning, by the Triton's fountain, I came across Nausicaa in tears. She does not yet know that he is gone. I think we did the right thing by her, we faithful ones of the guild. But society will be bored to death without him, and the manager of the Hippodrome will probably commit suicide with disappointment. And I find our hero has gone off with a large account unpaid at the wine merchant's, and another at pretty Miss Yolante's flower stall in the market. Surely there are two sides to every blessing, O most excellent Timothos. And that was letters from the Phaeacian capital. Now we have that one read. Let me just peruse the other one. Did we do? I don't think we did do that. The water nymph one. It's annoying because we haven't gone in sequence, and that's why I'm not sure if we did. Okay, let's see. Let me just go through this. I'm pretty sure we did Corydalus. We have done letters from the Phaeacian capital just now. I
think we might have done the Tower Gargoyle, but I'm not sure. So, but I'm going to. It's shorter, so I'm going to go and do that one. So 129. There we go. So the next bit is going to be the story of the Tower Gargoyle, unless we've already read them, but I don't think we have. The Tower Gargoyle. Master Julian Campion, the solo boy at St. Martin's Church, was a favourite with the clergy because he was quiet and zealous and had eyes like a girl by Burne-Jones. Had they known the future that was in store for him, I do not know how their attitude might have changed. But they would have been surprised, most of them, could they have seen, even in those days, into his soul. It may have been to some strain of romance in his parents that he owed his rather high-flown baptismal name. Certainly the boy himself was imaginative enough and created a very wonder world about the old fabric of St. Martin's, in which his life was centred. No poet ever found forest richer in enchantment than he, its gloom of gladed columns, nor April air so pleasant as that faint, unfading memory of incense, nor sunset like those windows flaming purple and gold. He saw nothing of the visual splendours of the world outside, little of its pomp and stir of incident. Profane romance and legend had not found him, but he knew the lore of the magic cycle that centres in Christmas and Epiphany, its stars and angels, its happy shepherds and Arabian kings. He would learn later, as his art bears witness, to steep himself in the tragedies of Shakespeare and Aeschylus. Now his pity and fear were more deeply stirred. He had a more intimate sense of the mystery of life, of the horror of evil, and of the strength and beauty of the divine soul in man, and he lived through the story of the atonement before the bare altar of Good Friday, or served in the sanctuary among the Easter lilies. History, the science, and the philosophy of the schools were not for him as yet, but he would listen rapt to Paul revealing dim aspects of the eternal truth. He watched the world unrolled in the 6 great days. He heard innumerable stories of peril and high enterprise and devotion of heroes that stretched far back into the beginning of time. Stories told through the noise of trampling nations, of empire after empire, gathering and scattering. It was only the voice of the shadowy primeval East that he heard. It was not only the voice of the shadowy primeval East that he heard. Out of the singing of the psalms, one of the great joys of Julian's day, he could sing them without book if the chants were those to which he knew them. Out of these there came to him not alone the cry of swart Hebrew fighters in peril, of fiery prophets, of hapless exiles in Babylon. He caught too sometimes the voices of monks who have sung them and translated them and made them their own. The spoiler wore for him not more often the corslet of Goliath than chainmail of the Baron, whose tomb stood in the southern aisle. The litany, too, made pass before him, a solemn pageant of the medieval world, resolute and dignified, ranged in due orders and degrees, splendid in ermine and gold and steel, girt with perils visible and invisible of fate and fiends. All this the services and buildings of the old church meant to Julian. And there were other pleasures here also, an intense life apart from this of the pure imagination. There were the ambitions, the rivalries, the triumphs of his singing. The operatic star of European fame does not taste more delicately the real savour of success than many a provincial choir boy such as he. There were friendships too, those glowing romances of later childhood, fostered here by the close intimacy of the choral life. One need not wonder that Julian had few interests outside the church's pale. The passing of a boy chorister's voice is one of the unwritten tragedies of art. Its intensity is heightened by the high morbid colouring of the age at which it happens. When Julian Campion's voice broke, his mind passed through a crisis. To himself he seems to assist at the services like a ghost, but the old building became dearer to him than ever. He took to wandering about it as he had never done before, sometimes talking with the sexton, but more often speaking to no one. Now, for the first time, as it were, he discovered the outward precincts, with their little community of almshouses clustering about the graveyard,
as if to make the impending journey as short as possible for the quiet old men and women who lived yet hardly lived there. He felt a certain relief and exultation sitting upon the tower parapet, high above the roofs and chimneys, looking down upon the intricate world upon which he seemed to be thrust forth, and listening to its distant voices. He knew the tower parapet well. Every Christmas Eve the choir of St. Martin's, with lanterns and great to-do, was conducted thither, up the turret stairs and across the great shadowy bells, to proclaim the tidings of the festival of the dark and waiting world below. It was a tradition with the choir boys on this occasion to pass the compliments of the season to a certain grotesque figure carved without the parapet, on a level with the ledge on which they stood. It had a gaping human face with horns and the haunches of an animal, and a leaden spout projected from its mouth to carry off the rain from the ledge. Julian had had from childhood an especial friendship for all the sculptures of St. Martin's, the St. John Baptist by the font, the alabaster knight on the tomb in the southern aisle, the harping David carved in wood upon the organ case. His interest in the gargoyle had hitherto been mingled with repulsion, for the priests had told him that these creatures were carved on the exterior of churches to symbolize the excluded powers of evil. This very consideration now gave the figure a new fascination for Julian. Oppressed himself with a sense of banishment, he seemed to find a sympathizer in the uncouth stone. Sometimes in the old days he had felt a sense of pity for the poor pilloried goblin, an impulse to commiserate with it, to speak to it of some of the glories from which it was shut out, of the arches of the music, of the solemn ceremonial, how the amens and the kyries would curl and linger about the carvings on the chancel roof, how the procession moved with censer and banner through the multitude like a river of deep music. This was not the nature of his feelings now. Something in the complex expression of the face moved his curiosity. He expected to receive rather than to give. The parapet was of open stonework, and by stooping and putting one's head through an aperture, one could examine the gargoyle closely. One day the boy did so, bringing his own face and the stone face close together. A strange sensation followed. It was as if he heard faintly a great and complex music, which, because of its faintness, did not satisfy him, but only filled him with a passionate longing. There came over him a craving for excitement, a keen desire to feel, to act, to imagine. When he rose, he looked with a new curiosity at the tumbled roofs of the town, at the winding peopled roads and river, at the country stretched beneath him like a map. He thought that a devil had spoken to him, and climbed quickly down through the bells, filled with horror. Yet a few days after, he was back again to hear the strange melody. That was the beginning of a new life for Julian Campion. He ceased to mope alone in the dark church. He began suddenly to engage in sports and to roam the country with his friends. He became ruddier and robuster in body. The priests were not altogether pleased with the new direction of his life, for he had already grown less regular in his religious duties, and there were some mad escapades besides. And yet this was the time when his boyish triumphs at the old town school first gave evidence of those qualities which were afterwards to win him distinction, first at the university and then in the world. Whenever ennui or languor came over him, for youth also had its languors, the boy would repair to the tower gargoyle. The effect was always a renewal of his weird energy. It is said that he conversed with the thing. He himself, in fact, always spoke as if his intercourse with it were articulate, and he used to give him whimsical accounts of the utterance of what he called his oracle. He used to say that their conversation began most properly with the weather, for the daimon spoke of skies, storms, stars, and other phenomena of which his exposed position might warrant his speaking with a certain authority. So that Julian, a poor pulling indoor child as yet, found matter enough for wonder and interest in his utterance, and looked with new eyes upon the world beneath the river, the distant woods, the hill behind which the sunset burned. It was thus, he declared, that he first came to love wild nature. He said also that the gargoyle would whisper strange pieces of scandal anent the lives that beat beneath the roofs of the town, and the honeycomb of yards and gardens. Thus, it seems, the future author first engaged his curiosity in the things of his fellow man.
More quaintly still, he maintained that the thing told him secrets about the far past, and would give him references
which he could verify between the mushy leather of old Greek texts in the school library. But most curious of all is the local legend, for such it is, though not yet 20 years old, how in a headstrong fit Julian Campion determined to take the gargoyle into the church. It was an evening in the full midsummer. He had gone up the parapet to watch the strange northern glamour which for 3 nights had burned white from sunset until dawn. The gargoyle, it is said, came away quite easily in his hand, and seemed to curl up in his pocket like a rabbit. The church below was already being lighted for service, and as Julian passed through it on his way to the vestry, he was to act as acolyte that night in glowing red before the high altar. The place seemed shrunken and insignificant as never before. The lights blazed up, the people came, the organ spoke, but the whole solemnity seemed like a mockery to Julian. It was as if he could see into the hearts of the congregation, and how the women were thinking of their hats, and the men of he knew not what, but not of the worship for which they were arrayed. The brilliance of candles about the altar had lost its mysterious glory as a chapter of the Revelation. The church itself looked bare, and he thought he saw great spiders stirring dimly in the clerestory. The words of the psalms were jargon. Those of the hymns doggerel, or worse, contained profane and horrible side meanings. In the middle of the service, the gargoyle slid from beneath Julian's cassock and began to run at large about the chancel. It scampered to and fro before the altar rail, gibbering and peering about. It climbed like a monkey up the screen that flanked the stalls, and Julian saw it spring sideways as it reached one of the carven seraphim, giving a sharp, soft hiss like a kitten's. Horror held him as he watched it continue its course, growing bolder as it climbed, he thought, and working its way towards the sanctuary. Every minute it seemed to turn and leer at him. He averted his face. When he looked again, the thing was crouching on the altar steps and slowly creeping forward. He hid his face in his hands, and presently, upon the darkness, he seemed to see the gargoyle touch the embroidered frontal and gather itself to climb. Then someone laid a hand upon his shoulder, and he flung back his head, seeing nothing, and fainted in the place. Some of his story an old clergyman told me, with wonder in his voice, who was with Julian Campion in his last days at St. Martin's. They had been close friends, and sometimes correspond still, for the priest has a large mind, and something of the faith that is above the logic of theologians. I will close this curious account with an early poem of Campion's, written in fact at this time, and purporting to be a versification of the words of the oracle. They throw some light on Campion's other remarks as to the classical symphonies of his daemon. I believe that there is no evidence for thinking that the tower gargoyle was ever a Greek god beyond its obvious pan-like shape. Though architects have told me that the figure is unique, and but for its excellent preservation might as easily be supposed to be the work of old Hellenic idol makers as of a medieval English mason. The poem follows here. The gargoyle, year-long across the belfry bars. Hello? So, hello there. Just saw you in the chat. I'm just going to check. I just got a message. Hold on. I'm going to check it real quick. Okay. So let's start the poem again. So it's a the gargoyle. Yearly long across the belfry bars, the whimpering doors are blown, where year long under the sun and stars I ponder gazing down upon the dwindled meadow squares and the smoky wreathed town,
Faintly the blue smoke rised up in the happy human town. The folk at eve by the fireside sup, while the night breezes moan, for the gargoyle tipping his cold cup of rain from the parapet stone. On Sunday morn to the church they flock, they save their souls within, but I hang dizzily here and rock in the bell-pack's hideous din. For me those wide mouths bellow a mock, I may not enter in. I am fixed for a symbol, a menacing, I hear the mumbled prayer. Far off I hark to the song they sing, but may not enter there. A carved devil, a vermin thing, an outcast power of the air. The rains of many a waning year have scored this rind of stone. Let them bluster, the limbs I wear are bone of the old earth's bone. And the elfin spirit that harbours there is peace of the old earth's own. And when the summer stars are bright, I think what I have been. My thought speeds back through the ages' flight to a time of halcyon sheen, to the streets of a city shining white and the panelled seas between. I drained no gutter of rancid showers, mine was a marble shrine. They brought me fruit and honey and flowers, sweet bread and elder wine. I was a god in the olden hours of those ages crystalline. A sheer of pitiless destinies thorough that fair world ran. The new gods caught and took for a prize the little wayside Pan, and nailed him hither Prometheus wise to suffer their utmost ban. And here I ponder and wait the day when the evil rule shall wane, when the glum new god shall be put away and the world grow blithe again, and the little goat feet be loose to play as of old through city and plain. So that was the Tower Gargoyle. And The following story
is once again from the same collection. It is a few pages. I believe we haven't done this one either. It's called Ariel. So I hope we haven't. If I realize we did, I'm going to correct myself through the recital, but I hope not. So Ariel. The heroes and heroines of the old Greek myths sighed after strange sweethearts at times. Pygmalion, for instance, loved a statue, Ixion having a will to more elusive and mobile charms, a cloud. I am going to tell you how I placed my affections more strangely still, for I loved an air of music. The life of one who sojourns in a strange town among few friends, on whose hands time hangs heavy in lodgings, in a street of demure and monogamous suburban villas, weaves itself of an immaterial and flimsy texture. Its events, its circumstance are trifles, the most delicate. Humble incidents and quiet hues and imperceptible notions attain a significance hard to realize in more stirring times. Glimpses of the life of the dreaming street, the guest business of unknown neighbors, the falsetto summons of the morning milkman, the weekly visit of the city band, these are the only festivals which paint his placid calendar. The voices of this faint universe are especially near to the imagination, and yet more particularly the night voices, with pleasant appeal or otherwise. The tinkling of neighborly pianos in revelry, or less remote, the subdued and various breathing of perfumed chambers adjacent, owl crows that herald the rise of night, gusty anthems of cats far off, good strains shunting and whistling and trailing. So good strains, shunting and whistling and trailing away like commerce snuffling in her mighty sleep. The coming of a hurdy-gurdy is like the coming of an earthquake. Fancy, then, that some years ago such a life was mine, and into this ear world of influences alluring or vexatious, interesting, or astounding, sails a music whose presence is like a gracious muse, a goddess ex machina. It was breathed from an open casement, generally at twilight. The window faced mine, not so inconveniently near, but that I could shut out its gentle voice at will by pulling down a sash, but I only did this once or twice at the very beginning. It was valanced in a medley of creepers,
of which the clematis was chief. I fancied I could catch their perfume across the intervening street. At first I used merely to listen and admire the sounds and sweet airs, the nocturnes, the songs without words for their own sake and sensuous loveliness. So one may admire the grace of unknown beauties in the street, mere lovely pageants that light and pass and disappear. This is a brave kingdom for me, said I, in the spirit of a sailor on Prospero's island, where I shall get my music for nothing. I am a humble but ardent devotee of the melodious art, and deprived as I was of my instrument of my own, with which to vex the breeze, except an old zither, which in my lodging house sitting room supplied the place of a great screen. The voices from the window were from the first a rare delight. But more came later. I had never been able to identify the maker of this music, even so much as by conjecture, among the familiar types that passed my window, punctual as the hours, throughout the day. My own times and seasons did not coincide with the invisible laborer, with the invisible tabberers in this, but gradually a personality became more surely revealed to me than by glimpses in the street. Behind all that grace of melody, I was soon able somehow to discern distinctly, as perhaps more intimately than from grace or shape and glance of eyes and lips one may, an individual and beautiful soul. How shall I tell you without profanity in the very attempt the aspect and features of this soul on which I looked at twilight? A feminine psyche, without doubt, so wayward and lucid was it, and so fresh it could not be but young. One that worshipped chiefly the beautiful in things, not alone those its manifestations canonically niched by authority and age, but the scraps and shreds of it daintily, to be picked from the gross flood of things ephemeral. One touched like every modern soul that thinks and feels, with a certain sense of lading mystery in life, one that dreamed often in the old age, and loved its motley of local colour, yet full of vigour and spirit and romantic ardour, cheerless for all its pathos, and shot with a dainty humour that transfused all the texture of complex melody in which it moved and lived. A soul indeed worthy to be arced in a harmony of sound, rather than in gross limbs and material humanity. How I inferred, or rather recognized, so lovely a microcosm from the mere repertoire of a lodging-house piano! Yet I protest it was a piano of no ordinary excellence. From the happy jumble of that repertoire, hymn and folk song, Person, Chopin, jostling one another, the mightiest sound masonry of Beethoven growing up side by side with the fairy arbours of Yolanthe, sometimes with some little silk and pseudo-Asian pavilion, daintily ephemeral from the modern musical comedy, all this I leave to the reader's imagination to determine. He must picture all this as the body of the soul revealed, in itself possessed of a physical perfection so exact, so nearly and nicely adapted to the spirit that informed it, as to bear witness to qualities not otherwise perhaps apparent. An idealizing ambition of a happy genius, for success not always joined to so much subtlety and grace. I never witnessed, possibly through the lucky fate of office hours, the throes of that gymnastic of scale and arpeggio, by which assuredly that top of health and grace and suppleness was maintained. I might have valued even this as a lover in old Hellas would wait on his beloved at the palestra. As it was, what man of vacant hours could look on such a soul and such a shape in all the majesty of seemingly spontaneous beauty and yet remain indifferent? And next there began to grow up, note by note, an air of waltz unknown to me, whose origin no ingenuity or enterprise of mine could discover. When I say that it seemed made from the distilled essence of all those moods which I had caught in the music generally, you may gather some notion of its charm. It dawned up gradually through many weeks, first a phrase, then a theme, then a mist of sweet notes uncomposed, out of which other themes and melodies would shape themselves and play till they were gathered again under the wing of the sailing central music, singing now before it died. The waltz seemed the very heart of the music spirit that I had come to know, the heart, or should I say the brain, and the head, the speaking eyes and face, That part, at any rate, on which the essence and distinctiveness of the personality is an epitome most completely impressed. You have the heroine. What of the romance? If the loved one's being was airy and impalpable enough to daunt description, what is to be said of the love she inspired? For as the passion of a lover is always a more spiritual and delicate entity than its object, however divine, you must needs find my love confession of vanity in proportion to what inspired it. Here, set forth in cold, hard words, it seemed indeed a thing unreal, without events, without communication with its object, without possession or the attempt at possession or the loss of it. Yet to be haunted all day by the shadow of a person, to wait upon her going forth, as for the dearest bounty of the hours, to hoard and treasure such glimpses as our eremite his vision, as an eremite his visions, to behave as if like were not possible without its daily dole, however small of these, is love in a sense, I suppose. Love, perhaps, such as the faint pulse of life in Belvoir Street alone allows. Love as of the bloodless happy departed in Elysium. Yet men have been inspired to high achievement by a love whose outward history was no more than this. Hello. We are currently, sorry, I just noticed you in the comments now. We're currently finishing off the story called Ariel from The Mistaken Fury and Other Lapses by Oswald Coldray, which is the third story from this collection we've read tonight. You've missed the weird, you missed the sci-fi story we started on about how in the future, after China takes over the world, all women will become mannish giants who will want to nibble on men's ears and will not be able to stand living with them under the same roof without eventually murdering them. Also, airplanes were made impervious to falling from the sky thanks to condor blood injected into them, apparently. Anyway, we'll only have a little bit left of this with the last story for now. So, yes, there we go. The rest of my tale is on a grosser level and spoken standing on earth, not wrapped above the pole. If you like the rarefied atmosphere of what precedes, you may feel a sullying flavour in the sequel. But Belvoir Street is, after all, connected with the rest of the world, execrable as the tram service is. Of what use are dreams and ideals and super-refined sentiment if we do not bring them into touch with life, to shine or to be shattered in the contact? I suppose the lady of my dreams should have met me at a ball and been revealed to me as we floated together on the wings of our own waltz. What actually happened was this. At a private suffragette meeting to which I was inveigled by two girl acquaintances, an old lady gave a recitation on behalf of that pernicious cause.
Jak ją pożonują, czyli na jedno, w którą mam przygodą. Że to mnie zajmę, jak są spaty debile. No ty już myślisz.
Sorry, I was being interrupted and pestered by my horrible, monstrous mother. The physically abusive alcoholic I'm forced to live with now. Anyway, I made great friends with this old lady, for she was a person of much culture and charm. I showed her my poems, for I am a minor poet, and she said they lacked body, a verdict which more pretentious judges have from time to time corroborated. We finally quarrelled on the feminist question. So far as my observation goes, the New Women movement is not strong in music. I was therefore very much surprised to learn later that the old lady in question was the maker of the Belvoir Street Waltz, which the reader probably knows, though under another name, and the mistress of the Belvoir Street piano. So there's that one. So we've had 4 stories so far today, and let me just think. It is possible I might have to call it a night for now, not because I want to necessarily, but because I don't want someone coming in here and screaming at me and at people in the audience.
So I'm going to probably try and record properly tomorrow for regular video content, and I will probably try and stream later in the evening to try and like get back in the swing of it. So thanks for stopping by, and yes, so anyone interested anyone who came in late, I do advise you go and check out the first story we read. Well, actually, we started off by reading the last page and a half of the last story from the previous stream, which got cut off when the Wi-Fi or the connection got temporarily disconnected. So we finished off that. So anyone who didn't read the end of that can go and watch that bit. But after that, the actual proper full story we read was William McMahon's weird, futuristic, post Yellow Peril sci-fi feminist, I don't know what story about. I don't really know. But yeah, so I do advise people to go back and listen to that one because it's definitely a doozy. And of course, the other stories we've read today as well, but that one's definitely so weird that I decided I simply had to cover it. So yeah, that I thank you for. I've had this thing. I need to actually look this up. Thank you for joining the stream. I'm just going to throw in a couple of links in the where is it? There it is. Description. So yes, if you've just heard, you've heard a very small sampling of what I have to deal with on a daily basis. So I'm just going to throw in the PayPal address and the link to the GoFundMe. Any and all donations, if you can make them, are appreciated. Of course, nothing. You're not. No one. I put up the link to. I put up the link to. I'm just gonna have to I'm sorry. I'm just trying to copy this. Copy a link. There we go. That's a shorter version of that link because I have the full copy with everything. So this is the shorter version of the GoFundMe. And like I said, anything at all donated is appreciated. Of course, it's not apparent. It's not necessary. And I'm just very sad that now a couple of other people have come in just as I'm winding things down. Tomorrow I'm going to go and try and finish and read off a couple of more of the stories from here, at which point I believe we're going to be basically close to having read the entire book on stream. And, if I actually manage to also record a proper video early morning rather than in the forenoon or early afternoon, we will see. I've not yet managed to actually do a video and stream on the same day. I'll see if that happens anyway. Thank you all for coming and watching. Anyone who comes in later watches the VOD, I thank you. And I appreciate you coming in, listening to me rambling on about these things and sharing my love of the old and obscure. So anyway, thank you very much. And yeah, I'll be seeing you hopefully tomorrow in one capacity or another, hopefully in both. And yeah, so thanks.